Okay, everybody, welcome to Our Experience, ASCP's podcast. I'm your host, Chad, alongside my co-host, Tom. And today we are doing a pillar of industry, celebrating one of our pillars of industry in Dee Antimasaris, who is with us today. Dee, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, well, why don't we jump into what we like to do is talk about your pharmacist origin story. How did you get into pharmacy, become a pharmacist, and end up where you are today? So go for it.
Oh, well, yeah. If you don't get bored by it, I'd love to share it because it's kind of an unusual route. So I started out at UC Davis, University of California, Davis, as a chemistry major. And, I loved chemistry. I still love pharmacology. And it's because, I like the idea of essentially cooking stuff. So I, get done with my chemistry degree, and I go to work at a petroleum company, because in San Francisco Bay Area, there's lots of petroleum companies. And this was in the early 80s when the majority of the engineers were, well, all the engineers were male. And I know this sounds kind of odd, but it's true that me and my friend who I was in school with, we were the only ones who were female interns there. And we looked at each other and said, oh, no, this is not sustainable. Like, we can't go and get a PhD and end up working in this environment. Plus, refineries smell bad. So
I'm getting like Landman, Billy Bob Thornton vibes now. Like, that's where you started.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was an absolute, I don't know if that word is acceptable nowadays, but I was a tomboy growing up. I played on the boys' soccer team because there was no girls' soccer team. I love sports.
That's awesome.
I thought it would be fun to go work in the petroleum industry until I realized it's not safe to be the only girl in a team of 100. It's just not a pleasant experience. So I kind of stopped at that point and said, I don't know what to do. And my buddy, she went on and did a PhD in chemical engineering and ended up teaching at Berkeley. And so I decided that I'm going to just goof off for a year and figure out what to do, get a job. And I became a ski technician, and I worked with Rossignol. And that kind of took me around the ski circuit in different countries and stuff. And at some point, my parents said, you need to get a job or we're cutting you off. So I thought, okay,
ski technician wasn't cutting it.
No, they had to subsidize that, So I thought, oh my goodness, what do you do with the chemistry degree? And then I realized, wait a minute, I don't like blood, I don't like guts, so I can't go to medical school. And I went to pharmacy school. And sure enough, in pharmacy school, I did a veterinary pharmacy rotation, and they were spaying an animal, and I fainted. So that made me realize that, okay, good choice not to go into medicine or nursing. And I went to University of the Pacific. So in California, back in the day, there were 3 pharmacy schools, right? USC, San Francisco, and Pacific. Now I think there's, I don't know, a lot more. But so we all knew each other, and it was a fantastic experience. And after that, I'm sure Chad, did you experience this when you graduated, or Tom or anybody can comment on this? When you finished school, did you feel ready to go to work, or did you feel like you didn't know anything?
That's a tough question. I think I was an old school PharmD, so I was a BS in pharmacy and then kept going to get my 2-year post-BS PharmD. And by the time I got there and the faculty was all saying, now you have to go do a residency, I was like, no, now I have to get a job. Yeah. So I don't know if I felt ready, but I felt like it was time to get a job. So...
Okay, so you, that's right. You went to school during the time when, the pressure to do a residency was really high.
Yeah, I feel like it still is probably. It may be more because it's a 6-year degree instead of, at that time, the PharmD was a 7-year process.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, and I was in kind of this situation where I felt like, gosh, I'm afraid to go to work and be responsible for all this by myself. So I kind of ducked into a residency to learn some more. And turned out it was a geriatrics residency. And later on, I found out that a lot of people who get into geriatrics, it's because maybe they were, close to their grandparents or something. And I was. Were you, Chad? You ended up in geriatrics?
No, no. I did like my rotation, that I did a rotation with Omnicare. And I did like consulting as a way to start working more clinically right out of school without doing a residency. And long-term care was an area you could do that to some degree pretty easily. So, no, the company that hired me because they needed a PharmD to get a contract, and I was available. So I was like the token hire. Hey, we have a PharmD now. Give us those 14 nursing homes. And that's how I got started.
Wow, that's just so serendipitous.
Right?
That's fascinating. Yeah, yeah. Well, and so, by dumb luck, a lot of us ended up consultant pharmacists. And so when I finished, I had young children, and here's the nice thing about pharmacy: you can work part-time. And actually, my dream was to own a store. And actually, I remember chemistry. I like making things. I like making cosmetics. I like compounding. But quickly, it occurred to me that insurance was definitely influencing the business, and that path wasn't an option anymore. So ended up, doing consultant pharmacy, and who knew that was like the original polypharmacy gig,
right? Back
in the day, right? I mean, you really quickly learn that you need to balance therapeutics with, saving people from toxicity, and really what American Geriatrics teaches is what matters most to the person, like individualized care. So, I will never forget. I'm always grateful to Larry Rice. You probably know Larry Rice from Pharmerica.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, he drugged me around and taught me how to do consultant pharmacy, and he was pretty patient. Like he would do, 4 charts by the time I did half of one. And I'm just forever grateful to the people who trained me. And actually, the corporations like Omnicare and Pharmerica and now Trilogy. Oh, I can never. What's Rob's?
Yeah, Synchrony.
Trilogy's the parent.
They're
company.
Synchrony. Why did I think Trilogy?
Synchrony.
I can't remember the name.
Yeah,
I mean, they really,
And Larry's like legendary. I mean, he's like the quintessential California consultant pharmacist, without a doubt.
Yeah, I still see him every once in a while at meetings.
It reminds me, note to self, we have to have him on the podcast.
Absolutely. He's mentored so many people.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd probably love that. And so that consultant pharmacy journey allowed me to learn about interprofessional roles, right? Because you otherwise might not understand about multidisciplinary care, unless you work in a hospital, in a certain area. So over time, I'm just so grateful for that career and that start. And so then what happened was, my husband wanted to move to a job here. And, people that I knew at Kentucky, the kind of our sister school that has a pharmacy school, but our school doesn't have a pharmacy school, knew that University of Louisville, the medical school, was looking for a geriatrics pharmacist to lead the polypharmacy program. So they had an endowment from a local, this is what's humbling, a private citizen gave money to try to do something about polypharmacy, at a time where other funding sources really aren't there, and they're still not there. If you look at NIH funding, not a lot of it is directed towards studying polypharmacy. So this donor had given this money, and the geriatrician who was the head of the family medicine department knew of the value of our credentialing. And here's the irony. When I was in school, I was so busy skiing, I could care less about, professional societies and getting credentials and all this sort of thing. But a friend of mine in Hawaii said, Dee, you really, really need to invest in yourself. and you really need to do the BCGP. And this is Joy Higa. I don't know if you might know her. She's a really good consultant pharmacist, not a PharmD, but a really, really great career mentor. She's my peer, she's about my age, but she said, you really need to do that. And here's what I told her. I go, oh, come on, Joy. I did a residency in geriatrics. Why would I have to get a BCGP? I mean, that makes no sense. But she was right. And so she's the one who encouraged me to go to ASCP meeting, do some of the studying. So how does that relate back to how I ended up here? A lot of people applied for this position. My understanding, it was like 15 people, and there was not a one who had the credentialing that the chair would recognize as being, okay, we'll hire this person.
Wow, that's cool.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
We have that, we're doing that 4Ms grant with the John A. Hartford Foundation, and it essentially builds a designation. It's not really a credential or certificate. It's not like a board certification, but it identifies that the pharmacist has gone through probably something akin to the nomenclature or the language of age-friendly, and they get a digital badge for doing that. And part of our conversation with the John A. Hartford Foundation was, our pharmacists are age-friendly pharmacists. They already do this. So part of our approach to our members and to pharmacists in geriatrics, pharmacists like that have a background like yours, was I don't want to make it sound like you're not good enough and you need this credential. What I want to do is validate it in a language that the public can understand and that other disciplines can understand. And obviously, high-level clinicians understand what a board-certified geriatric pharmacist is, but the general public might not understand what that is. And using the age-friendly terminology that they've pushed to be able to say, well, I'm an age-friendly pharmacist, all of a sudden that resonates with just about everybody that you might say that. They might not understand the detail of what the age-friendly structure is, but they understand the term age-friendly. And they understand, oh, you must be a pharmacist that works with older adults. You must be a pharmacist that knows how to, look at medication regimens and help me make better decisions and all those things. So, no, that makes sense. That's kind of a cool story of how you got involved and how you got selected. Because someone did recognize the effort that you put in to be a pharmacist that specializes with older adults, which...
Yeah, I mean, the medical community has this all the time. You have ear, nose, and throat, and, different very specific body parts. And, we're just talking about geriatrics, but there is a difference in the training that it takes for someone to understand that the body changes when they turn seniors.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead, Dee.
Sorry, Ted. No, I was looking at the wrong square. I didn't see you talking.
No,
go ahead.
I was just going to say I got invited just today by the National Kidney Foundation because they're pulling together a group to look at how we evaluate kidney function. And it seems to me that their intent is to use, glomerular filtration rate, eGFR, instead of the Cockcroft and Galt formula. So I'm like, that's interesting. And it's super interesting that they recognize that, hey, we have to have pharmacy represented here because that's what they do, is they use this formula, use this lab test to determine how medications best fit people that are older. So it'll be interesting to be involved in that, but it's the recognition that we're at a point now where it's not like we have to fight for position. People know what pharmacists can do and know to involve them because, they know that probably our membership is using some version of kidney function every day to make decisions.
Yeah, what I'm finding out is that, because remember, I'm at an institution where we don't have a pharmacy school. And I'm finding out that our practice peers, the physicians, the nurses, the dentists, the therapists, they recognize that we bring a skill to the table that nobody else can bring. And specifically about medications. So, I taught in the medical school and the dental school I taught their basic pharmacology course. And I know this sounds kind of trite, but it's true. They only get 1 or 2 semesters of 4 years. So think about what we learn in depth, and they know that, so we can be of great help, and we're getting recognized for that.
Well, and you know, I was today years old when I just thought of the concept of going to a school, learning medicine or pharmacy, and not being integrated onto a team at some point, working in the hospital or working in a rotation where you were put there. Like I was put there. I was put on a liver transplant team. I was put on a medical team, and your perception coming out of school is, you know, yeah, I belong here. I'm going to work with physicians. I'm confident to be able to communicate with them to some degree. And they also, reciprocal, are used to having a pharmacist around. But I guess if you go to a school that doesn't have a pharmacy school, you're less likely to do your rotation sites in an environment where you have that. And there may be pharmacists running around, but you don't have another pharmacy student that's sort of your peer student working with you on a team, working on patients. I never really thought of that. But that changes your whole perception as a physician, I think, when you go into practice. Is like, I'm not used to working with a pharmacist.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're really, really at a critical, pivotal point. I always joke that after I retire, pharmacist will be an equal member of the care team, and meaning we will get paid for our services.
Yeah.
Because, you know, that whole history of the tradition of us getting paid tied to a product, and we're kind of still stuck with that. You'll see different states like California. I can only speak for California and Hawaii, but I heard Ohio too. They're passing laws that, you know, insurers must pay pharmacists for, you know, cognitive services within the scope of practice. And this movement to use the community embedded pharmacies to fill the gaps in providers. There's not enough providers. There's not enough, you know, healthcare workers. So they're thinking, oh, well, maybe the pharmacist can help now. But I think it's really happening.
Go ahead, Tom.
No, I agree completely. Dee, at Louisville, and you know, I said the title was Polypharmacy and Medication Management. But what outcomes? I mean, you've been there for a long time, so I'm sure when you first started out, you thought, man, how am I going to make a difference? But still being there and still doing that same program, it sounds like that they felt like that it is definitely worth keeping that in place. So just give me an idea of kind of what you've seen, what has evolved over the last 10, 15 years.
That is such a good question. So when I first came to this charge, you know, in academia, they'll hand you a key and they'll go, here's your office, go figure it out. You know, it's kind of how it goes. And if you're a clinician, you only see things through your lens. You don't see things systemically necessarily. You think, oh, the problem is if we could just teach doctors to do a better job on the methods that we have. You know, if they can learn how to look at adverse events, and, you know, you teach them how to do MTM. So, you know, I'm busy doing that. I'm busy running around all over the country at medical, nursing, different conferences, you know, doing sessions on polypharmacy and medication management, which, to be honest, is pretty much just what we learn at our conferences, and I'm just kind of sharing it with them, right? And after a certain number of years, I realized that that's not the problem. Or it is the problem, but the bigger problem is the healthcare system. And what's driving polypharmacy is that metaphorical 15-minute office visit. That is what's driving polypharmacy. So I moved the program to public health, where they study health systems. Public health has behavioral health, epidemiology, biostats, and health systems and health administration. So in trying to work on, okay, what do we do about this 15-minute office visit? And how do we work in a complex system to better configure care, given the fiscal incentives and pressures that exist? And the first thing I always hear from my colleagues is, oh, we'd love to have a PharmD. Please, can we have a PharmD? Well, I fought that fight for a long time within our system. And, you know, what's interesting is there's a lot of data on the return on investment But the problem really comes down to the fiscal incentives that cause the healthcare system to be configured the way it is, which actually is without us. And I think that will change, but really that's the biggest driver of polypharmacy. There's no dedicated medication management. There's no billing code for it.
Right.
Well,
That's worthwhile.
And that's what I love about where your work has taken you. We all know what polypharmacy is. We all know it's a problem. We all, a lot of us in pharmacy work on it on a day-by-day basis. And some people might say, well, Dee, if you're going to go teach other disciplines how to address polypharmacy, you're taking jobs or responsibility away from the pharmacist. But the reality is, by explaining what polypharmacy is, you're leading them to the conclusion that, hey, we've got to have a pharmacist part of this team somehow that we can work with in order to address this, because it's far too complex. We didn't get enough in school. We don't know how to do this. And instead of us feeling like we're bad doctors because we can't do it, we should feel like we're good doctors because we identify where we need some help and we go get that help. And that's what I love about it, because a lot of people, might look at it differently and say, polypharmacy, that's AI can do it. We just need to understand it. And when I've gone around the country to health systems that ask me to come in and talk about deprescribing or polypharmacy, they always approach from the same perspective. Give us like the top 3 things that we should be doing to deprescribe. And I'm like, that's not how it works. Like, you got to look at the whole patient, and every one of them's different, and every recommendation you might make is different to try to manage their medications. There's no like, oh, get rid of this. Like, there's too much of that out there. I mean, you could point them to some things that are generally misprescribed or where polypharmacy has a high frequency. But at the end of the day, it's not a cookie cutter thing that you can just hand somebody and say, here, make sure they aren't on any proton pump inhibitors. That's deprescribing. Now you've addressed it. It's just not that simple.
Problem solved.
Problem solved.
Yeah, then that's exactly it. What has happened in the system science area is this recognition. They've borrowed it from business and marketing science, actually, where they look at complex networks and stakeholders. And what has happened is, because we're scientists, we have designed healthcare along kind of a Newtonian, reductionist, linear, 2 + 2 = 4 system. But then the problem is you're engaging humans, and humans don't behave that way.
Correct.
Right? So the whole thing is that people are recognizing that polypharmacy is not cookie cutter. It's not linear. It's definitely individualized. And complexity science says that each system is local. What it means is it's not top down, it's bottom up.
Yep.
Right.
So you can see where a pharmacist plays a very specific role, and literally within their own geographic location. It's different from place to place.
Well,
so,
and we use terms like the industrialization of healthcare all the time, and you brought it up. Like, what was the primary problem? The primary problem was the 15-minute office visit, and God knows, today, I'm sure the office visit is less than 50. That seems like a long time. So we're asking physicians to see patients in 8 minutes, 7 minutes, because this is the industrialization of healthcare. We're asking pharmacists to fill 1,000 scripts a day because that's the industrialization. And all of those things contribute to a lack of quality, a lack of management, a lack of oversight. And then we complain about, people are on so many drugs. Well, yeah, no kidding. You've given the system no chance to address it. And to your point, there's no code to bill for it.
There's, and the quality measures show it.
Right.
Dee, I read somewhere where, I don't know if you said it or you were quoting somebody, you talked about clinical gaps and silos and said there's too many cooks in the kitchen. Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of where that came from?
Yeah, so that actually came from a really brilliant old country doc that really cared about the students and would take them, would go on rounds in the nursing homes with us. And that was his thing. He said the reason, and he was a geriatrician. A lot of times people go family med, they become geriatricians. And that was his kind of country way of saying there's just too many cooks in the kitchen.
I mean, everybody
so
should go back and watch Doc Hollywood, because that's the story.
Right. So think about it. So this guy's father was a real country doc, where he'd go to people's houses and he knew people and he provided really quality care. So the pendulum has swung so far towards this industrialized model that it's going to have to swing back. And you can see the patient-centered medical home model actually working really well. But what does that entail? It entails more literacy, more medication literacy. So a lot of my research interest is in that. And recently published a paper in the Journal of Nurse Practitioners where we looked at people's medication literacy. We asked 100 participants to answer 5 questions. What are you taking? How do you take it? What's it for? Name the top adverse effects and name any drug interactions. And I'm sure you can imagine what the results were.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah. like children's aspirin, not for children.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So the data came back which kind of shocked us. Everybody could name their medicines, but it turns out it was a study technique problem where we didn't anticipate that they were sitting at their kitchen tables with the drugs in front of them. And so, of course, they knew all their medicines. And the nurses on our study team pointed out something. So this is where interdisciplinary collaboration is powerful. They said, because, us pharmacists were just irate. We're like, oh, no, we ruined the study because they were cheating. They had their drugs in front of them. Of course, they knew what they were taking. But my nursing colleagues said, well, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a coping mechanism. People have lists.
Yep.
So I thought, okay, good. That's true. So that gets over that literacy piece a little bit. But the rest of the information, the data just kind of dropped down to zero. Like a lot of times people couldn't name any adverse side effects. They couldn't name any drug interactions for sure. Sometimes they would tell you how to take something, but they'd tell you wrong. So we had like an appropriateness point in our scoring rubric. But the point being that then we did like a feedback, and the more people are literate in medications, the more they realize how serious it is and how important our job is.
Absolutely.
So that's why I think medication literacy, and if us pharmacists can help people be more literate, it's not taking our jobs away. It's actually making people realize what the gravity of the work that we do.
So Dee, you've been in this industry, geriatrics specifically, for a long while. Now we've talked all the time about the silver tsunami, and we're going to double the amount of seniors here over the next 5 years, and all those statistics. If you had Trump's ear or Congress's ear or whatever, and you could wave a magic wand, or maybe CMS, whatever it is, give us 1 or 2 things that you would enact immediately if you were in charge to protect that senior wave of group coming in.
Oh, that's a good question. It really kind of goes back to what the Hartford Foundation is trying to do. I would lobby hard for individualized care, because that, in a nutshell, is what would prevent medication harm that our colleague Jonathan Watanabe so articulately quantified. It cost $526 billion annually. Non-optimized medication use, meaning non-individualized medication use, and it costs like 276,000 lives a year, which would make it rank 3rd if the CDC counted medication use as a cause of death, which they don't.
Right.
So that's what I would want. I think appropriateness of care, because, sometimes intentional polypharmacy saves lives. And one of the problems when people age is that there's ageism. People don't look at a person as an individual. They look at their age. I know for a fact that providers kind of shun away from complexity a little bit because, again, the healthcare system doesn't enable them to take care of it. So what they do is they do what they can. There's a decision scientists look at what they call system 1 and system 2 style thinking. System 1 thinking is, okay, I've got 15 minutes. Here's the data that's in front of me. This is the decision I can make. 2 + 2 = 4, okay? But in reality, you've got 17 times 24 going on. But because of the system, what happens is, and there's an article in JAMA about this, providers kind of ignore that and will prescribe something that's inappropriate just to get through the system enforced time limit. So individualization of care, I would say, hey, President Trump and Congress, if you want better outcomes and you save money, pay somebody to be the captain of the ship. That's it.
Pay the quarterback.
Sounds like we got to introduce you to RFK, Chad. Can you make that happen?
Right. Yeah, we can.
I'd love that.
Yeah, for sure. It reminds me, I'm old enough to remember the Bootman article, Lyle Bootman's article, where it was the fourth leading cause of death, and the number of deaths was, I think, 108,000. I don't remember if there was $1 billion number associated with it, or even if it was like $1 or $2 billion. So that's how far it's come, and I think it's come that far because of this shift in the population, as Tom's question alludes to. And we have to be starting to get ahead of that, or we're going to get overwhelmed. Because,
well, not only overwhelmed, but if you really dive into the literature on the aging population, it's going to bankrupt a lot of governments.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of single payer governments are aware of this, and they're trying to figure out what to do.
I do think it's one of those things, and I'll tell you a story. This week, I got a package, and it was on my doorstep when I got home from work, and it was just a cardboard box with blue tape, and it was blue Amazon tape, and on the blue Amazon tape was an ad for Amazon Pharmacy. So I grabbed from my box, and I'm like, what did we get from Amazon Pharmacy? And I opened the box, and it was something that my daughters had purchased. It was a lamp or something. It had nothing to do with pharmacy. But it struck me that the adhesive tape that they're using on the boxes for all of the boxes, and think about all of the boxes that Amazon delivers, now includes a ribbon ad for Amazon Pharmacy. Yep. And, this is not an indictment of Amazon Pharmacy. Good for them. That's what I would do if I had a pharmacy that was associated with Amazon. But what I think it does, again, the fear is, Amazon Pharmacy is going to take over. Everybody's going to get their meds through Amazon. This is the end of pharmacy. But the reality is they've taken the industrialization and the volume of pharmacy so far now that they have almost unbundled services through this industrialization that make it even that much more important that we pay for the service that now Amazon Pharmacy is not going to be able to provide. They're not going to be able to provide the counseling. They're not going to be able to provide the insight. All they're literally providing is the product. And I think that opens more doors than it closes as it relates to pharmacy. We'll see what happens, but we all know that you can't send 12 amber vials of product to an older person in their home and expect that they're going to be real efficient at not making mistakes filling their MedMinder, or not forgetting or not storing it, like all those things. So there's going to be opportunity that stems from the fact that we've drilled down the industrialization so far now that it is almost over-industrialized.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why my advice to young pharmacists is what my friend Joy said to me: invest in yourself and your credentialing, your skills, and have faith that that's going to pay off, right? Because it's kind of demoralizing when you see, CVS is shutting down all over the place, and but that's because this shift is really going to happen. You could see it, and so I think the badges on age-friendly care and BCGP and being part of the society and having that as part of your training is really what's going to survive.
I agree.
Don't you think? Mm-hmm.
For sure.
I think so. I mean, I think my journey was a example. Like I said, I went kicking and screaming into, do I really have to study this again? But in the end, that's what helped others recognize that I could bring that skill to the table.
Well, and if you look at other mature businesses, Bill Gates started Microsoft in his garage, and what did he do? He built computers.
Yeah.
Microsoft doesn't make their money building computers anymore. Microsoft makes their money on software and information. Apple isn't a phone or an iPod or earpods anymore. They're a content producer. Yeah. That product just became the vehicle, and pharmacy's in that same sort of space, right? It's a little slower, probably because it's healthcare. That pharmacy isn't the product anymore. It's the information associated with that product. And it's moving just like those other industries. And there's a fear out there that, well, for whatever reason, in pharmacy, it'll just end there. Once we've nailed that product down, we don't need the information associated with it. Well, of course we do. And of course, pharmacists are the only ones that can provide it. Like, who else could?
Who else?
So I think it's maybe it doesn't happen as quickly as technology, obviously, but it's happening, and it will continue to happen. And this older adult population is going to make it happen faster as a result of their need.
That's right.
Yeah, their uptake of extremely high-tech products. So that need for information, this is the other thing that nobody talks about, is the technology is getting more and more complex, and it's only effective if you understand how to use it.
Correct.
So not only are you fighting the classic geriatric conundrums of, can you leave mom home alone with her 10 pills? Besides that, each pill has to be taken a certain way, or else you've wasted $10,000 per month.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, back to your earlier point, it's the relationship. So, my parents at one point, when they were seniors, were forced to get most of their medications through mail order. It wasn't about the medication availability, their convenience. They didn't like that they couldn't go and pick up their medication and have a 5-second conversation or a minute conversation with that pharmacist. And so they felt that there was certainly, they could ask them questions and get more, more detailed specific. And you're just never going to get that through a mail order PBM or whatever. So, that relationship and that just existence there of being able to feel comfortable, they wanted that. They did not, but, again, they were forced to utilize their mail order.
Well,
so it was just a business decision.
Even if you look at managed care metrics on compliance and adherence, I mean, if you ever really closely look at those numbers, they're all predicated on order and delivery. This is when they reordered it. This is when they got it. And they'll identify that, a certain amount of gap, if you're on a once-a-day drug for a year, that, 320 days is considered compliant versus 365, even though I think as pharmacists we would say that seems to be a problem. It's not a problem when you're measuring it on a kind of population scale. But what it doesn't do is actually tell you, did they actually swallow that pill or inject that product? All it tells you is, we delivered it to them and we have a signed receipt or we have a picture of it on their doorstep. It doesn't tell you that when you got to their house and you looked in their basement, it was stockpiled in a corner because they didn't like it. Because, it was a beta blocker and they love to exercise and they can't exercise. They're like, I'm not taking that. When I take that, I can't exercise. We're headed to the reality of that environment, and we have to have solutions that address that environment. And it's not how fast and quickly and effectively can I deliver it to you and hold up a picture that it got to your doorstep. It's got to be more than that. It's got to be outcome driven. It's got to be, their blood pressure, we monitor it. It's down since they started this product.
Yeah, and you really have to protect people from, not only efficacy, but you have to protect them from harm.
Yeah.
I'll always remember as a young pharmacist working in a retail pharmacy we lived in Oregon, in kind of rural Oregon. This little old lady came in for her boyfriend, and she lived alone, and she wanted a refill, and she was bruised head to toe. So had she not come in, nobody would have seen it.
Right.
Yeah. So those are the kind of things that pharmaceutical care is not really just about refill counts and claims adjudication. And
Dee, First of all, you're awesome. You're a pillar of our industry. I don't know how long you've been a member of ASCP, but it's been a long time, and we appreciate that. And we certainly love the work that you've done and that you continue to do as it relates to polypharmacy and interdisciplinary education and talking the talk and walking the walk. So thank you for that, and thanks for being a guest on our show.
Oh, and thanks to ASCP for mentoring me along all the way.
Tom, any last words?
No, I just appreciate you being the voice on these critical issues. So get loud and stay loud. Keep the fight.
Well, and I also want to defer some thanks to the citizen that sponsored the endowment, that brought you to the University of Louisville, that put you in a place that didn't have traditional pharmacy or pharmacist services, so that you could demonstrate why it's so important that it is there. So thank you for that, and thanks to that person as well.
Yeah, I just want to bring up that the only evidence we have is that which is sponsored, right?
Right.
So it took her sponsoring this kind of work, or else it wouldn't have happened.
It's awesome.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank
again.
you guys. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
Lovely seeing you.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time on Our Experience.